welcome back, and this would be the latest thing. Beautiful old Sony STR-7055 receiver from the early 70s. And this one belongs to a customer of mine who brought this in to me about a month ago. Wasn't in any particular hurry, but did ask to have it back by Christmas. At the time he brought it in, I did take an initial look just to see where we're at. And the complaint was it had no sound whatsoever. And I found at that time the amplifier to be working. It was more or less of a dirty control issue. And I don't think there's a single control on this that does not have an issue. They're all in very bad shape. They'll need to be cleaned, and as well as that, the dial lamps are all bad. And so as we get the receiver opened up and get into that, I'll kind of give you my opinion on dial lamps and what I found the issue was trying to obtain the correct voltage for the stereo pilot lamp in this one. So we'll get the lid off this, we'll come in for some internal views of it and have a look around, and then we'll get it taken care of. So hang in there and we'll get going on that in just a moment. All right, coming in for a closer look, we're going to start here at the back of the unit, noticing provisions for 3 sets of speakers, all screw terminals, which was pretty specific for the time period. Some of them would incorporate screw terminals and RCA connections for speakers, but this one just having the screw terminals. Across to the other side, finding we have hookups for looks like 2 tape decks, an auxiliary, a phono. This one also has provisions for preamp out and main in. You notice right here there's a switch used to couple those together or separate them. And that switch is often overlooked when it comes to control cleaning. And it'll definitely be a destination that we will come to make sure that that is working correctly. On the inside we find our amplifier supporting circuitry driver components mounted on a sideboard along with the power supply components. Nice big 5-watt resistor sitting right there. I remember when I fired this up, the very familiar smell that those kind of produce after being on for a while. A nice, warm, old heat smell, almost like an old electric heater. As far as the output stage is concerned, this one using Toshiba's 2SC793s. All 4 outputs are exactly the same. I believe that they called that quasi-complementary symmetry, where they're all NPNs, not PNPs. Or there isn't any PNPs, they're all NPNs. I don't have enough information on that, haven't researched into that a lot, so, and haven't found a lot of these amplifiers that have actual output stage problems, unless something comes into play that creates some kind of catastrophic problem. All the controls look to be, at best, probably medium difficulty to get to. Those have some dual stages buried up underneath that dial cord string shield, so that might be a little bit of a challenge. This also featuring some of the selector switches have that that like inline design to it, and then a rotary knob that moves it along back and forth. Seen that many times before. Tuning cap has a shield on it. Did notice a few ICs in this. I'm sure those are FM related. Haven't really looked them up, but that'd be my guess. There is one here in the preamp. I'm going to assume that that might be some type of op amp. I don't know what that is. I don't know what they're using that for. So we'd have to check that out and see. But other than that, the old power caps have the screw terminations on them, so you can just screw your wires right to them. Those are Nippon, which was again very popular for the time. Very nice old unit. Taking a look at the dial lamp access, I did open one of these up when this came to me, and right behind this little shield right here you'll find a fuse lamp. Not the traditional size that you're accustomed to, a little bit smaller, but the traditional ones will work. I did look long and hard for the exact one with no luck. And the stereo indicator is in a very nice spot right there. Luckily for me, the dial pointer light is working, so we will not mess with that. We'll leave that alone. Yeah, overall, very nice old piece. It's in very good shape. A little bit of surface dust in there, but nothing too terrible. Maybe blow it out with the air compressor a little bit, but other than that, finding dirt where we would normally find it, you know, where it falls through the vents in the top of the cabinet. This cabinet not only has that wood case, but also has a black metal lid that goes on prior to the wood case. So, very nice old piece. So I think the first thing we'll do is just reconfirm what I found out about a month ago. Let's hook up some speakers to it, get some sound coming out, and see if we can reduplicate what I was able to duplicate a month ago, which was very touchy controls, intermittent sound coming and going with messing around with those controls. So we'll get the camera set up, get some speakers hooked up to it, and we'll pick it up. Stand by.
Yeah, I love that one, man. Crystal Gate.
All right, coming in with the radio on here, and that left channel cutting in and cutting out with the adjustment of the balance control. But this is working way better since I started playing around with these controls when I looked at it about a month ago. So it's doing its thing. One thing I noticed here also, we got muting on. There's no muting function at all, so we'll check that out in the service manual and see what we can find out about that. I'm sure there's an adjustment for that. I don't think you can see. The stereo light's just barely lit right there. That's because I haven't finished up with that. And we'll talk about lamps a little bit. I purchased some lamps for this, and the fuse type lamps are the ones that actually go in the dial, and these are just your typical 8 volt. I got two different kinds, two different amperage, because I could not find the exact one that went in there, and that's what brings me to this whole stereo pilot light indicator thing. I'll bring you in and show you what I did here after struggling with trying to figure out not trying to figure out, but more or less trying to find the actual stereo indicator lamp that had the correct amperage, and the amperage is very low. It's 0.03, and I couldn't find anything quite that low. So what I did was I cut the leads off of the old light and soldered them into an LED, a clear LED, and hooked them up that way. But we still have an issue because all the light's escaping out of the back, so I'm going to put a strip of aluminum tape there and force that light towards the front. Now I want to preface all of this by saying that I'm not a fan of putting LED lights in these old receivers like this. This was more or less just a desperation because I could not find exactly the lamp that would light correctly to make this on the front, you know, make it come through on the front. And you can see here, let me see. You can see it here. It looks pretty good, but I've got the camera kind of zoomed up there, so. But if I block that light with my finger and force that light back to the front, it looks way better. So it's just really, really, really dim. And I think that by putting a strip of aluminum tape right there, it's going to fix that. It's going to make that much better. But yeah, it's a kind of a weird amperage for the for the lamp. It's an 8-volt lamp, and it's got a kind of a weird amperage to it. So, like I said, just trying to get it taken care of, that's what I did. In order to fasten that there, the original lamp had a grommet, and that grommet fit right where that lamp is at. And what I did was just take a metal bracket and just kind of curve it at the top to where it would hold that LED right there in that hole where the grommet used to be, and then just attached it to the screw that holds the dial string guide on. And I think that'll be just fine. And I've actually done this one other time before, but only for the stereo pilot. Not a big fan of the look for the dial with the LED lamps in it, so that's not something I'd be comfortable with. I would go to any lengths to prevent having to use those for the dial lamps, but in this particular case, that was what I came up with. So I think what we'll do is I'm going to put a strip of tape on that, and I'll bring you back and show you the difference that it has made as far as the light, because right now all that light is escaping out of the back of that LED. And you might be wondering, well, how come you didn't just put the LED right through the center of the grommet and put it back the way it was? Well, then you're not going to get any light dispersion, because most of the dispersion is coming out of the side of the LED, not through the tip. And so that's the reason I didn't do that. Trust me, if that would have been a feasible way, I would have went that direction. So let me go ahead and let's get a piece of tape put on that and see what that will do as far as the dispersion of the light. So give me a second on that. All right, coming back in, and the camera's on the tripod about 4 feet away from the receiver, and you can clearly see now that there's some sort of red indicator light on. Can't really make out what the text is, but looks definitely way better than before. So let's take a look at our little tape modification here. And it's nothing fancy going on, just basically a small piece of aluminum tape right across the back of that LED, which is forcing more light towards the front. Put a couple pieces of electrical tape on either side of it just for reinforcement. And I think that's going to work out just fine. I did experiment with a piece across the top, but it really didn't have much effect as far as more light through the front of it, so I didn't want to put a bunch of tape in this guy's receiver. So we just do the minimal amount we can get away with that gives us the best improvement, and that's going to be just fine. Again, not a huge fan of the LED thing, but in this case, what needed to be done. So pulled up the service manual, and there is, as you would guess, an adjustment for the muting. And you can do it one or two ways. You can do the fancy way, get your signal generator out, 98 megahertz, about 30% modulated output, and then just tweak the 202 transformer down to the threshold point of that, or otherwise you can do it this way. Accurate muting adjustment can also be performed by utilizing an off-the-air local FM signal instead of the generator. And that's kind of the route that I went. We can see our stereo light in the front here looking good. All right, we have our muting on down here. So when we tune off the channel, and we should get nothing. Just static, perfect. And I went through a few of the caps in the tuning section of this, and there's a couple of low ones, there's no question about that. I mean, again, it's one of those things where we're not trying to restore it, we're just trying to repair it, and so probably won't mess around with anything like that. And for any kind of future reference, that's your transformer right there, 202. So I think we're to the point where we're going to get out the dial lamps and see what that's going to do for us. There's one here and then one over on the other side that we're going to have to take out. So let's pause and let me get those out and see. And there's also one in the meters too. There's a tuning meter there that has one. So let's get that. Let's do the meter one first. That looks pretty easy. So let's do the meter one first. Hang on for a sec. Let me get that. Let me get that out of there. All right, coming back in and getting our meter lamp changed out. Just kind of taking it a look from a distance here in the stereo pilot and the meter lamp. Pretty close in illumination. There's not very much, if any, difference at all there. And this receiver was a challenge in trying to gather up the correct lamps for this. But I was able to find the .25. I got these from a place called Bulb Town or something like that. Let's see. Yeah, Bulb Town. And I was able to get the .25s, which is the actual correct amperage one for the meter. But unfortunately, the dial lamps, they will also receive the .25s because I wasn't able to get the .35 or 36, I believe the service manual called for the dial lamps. Probably was just overthinking it a little bit on the lamps. I probably didn't really need to put that much effort into it, but was trying to get exactly what is supposed to be there. You'll see a tweaking tool stuck in the discriminator coil, and that's because once I got the lamp replaced, I figured out that my center point for my tuning meter was off a little bit. So got that tweaked up a little bit. And you can pretty much guess any tweak that you have to make is a product of age and component aging. I guess if we went through and just started changing every single capacitor, maybe we'd be doing a complete realignment for sure, probably, but you know, all we're doing is just kind of compensating for age. So with that easy one being done, I guess it's time to move on to the dial ones. Let's get those out and see what kind of challenge we got there. And those lamps are a little different styled, and we'll see that once we get them out, but let's get it apart a little further and take a look at those. Hang on one moment. All right, and you're coming back on my third attempt at this of trying to make sure that it's a safe repair. What I didn't take into consideration the first time is that this material from the factory right here is not conductive. It's just like some sort of paper. what that aluminum tape that I bridged across there is. And of course, when you fold it and stuff it back in that small hole, and of course it just shorts out the two connections for the lamp. So I removed all of it from the front side where the bulb is and put it on the back side. And so I think that's going to be the way we have to go with it. I just can't run the risk of it shorting itself out after I stuff it into that hole, or if something shifts during transport, that would create a scenario like that. So this way I think we're going to be safe. So let's go ahead and see if we can get it back in here. And it's a really kind of a tight little place that's at. It's not in this like really just simple loose place, loose slot that you just take a screw out of and it just falls right out in your hand. You have to kind of play with it to get it in there. That was the easiest I was able to put that in there. So okay, let's put these back in there. Well, that looks better already.
Lows about 13 and Saturday looks like sunny, a high of 31 degrees.
Starting to get a little illumination there. Once we get the other side done, then we'll cut the light off and do a shot. So let me move over to the other side and get that one out and see what that one looks like. I'm sure it's not going to be much better. Maybe. Maybe, maybe not. Turn the receiver off while we're messing around with this. It's just as terrible to try to get out as the other one. Plus the volume control board is right there in the way. But maybe, just maybe. I can sneak it out of there. I might have to bring some reinforcements to get this thing out of the way. Well, it may not let me without messing around with that volume control. Doesn't seem like it would be a problem though. See, I would think it would just pull up right there, but it's like, no, not happening. Okay. I don't want to force it. I don't want to break anything, so let me pause and see if I really do have to move that volume control. All right, I'll be back. Okay, well, if you want this one out, then you're going to have to take that loose, and you can get yourself a little access right there. Right there. Luckily, the front face of this is not enclosed to this, and so you can get that unscrewed just enough. And so I'm pretty happy with that, but I'm really happy about the fact that the paper's in better shape. So I am not going to even touch that. I am going to get that bulb out of there, put another one in there, and load it right back into the front of the receiver and tighten up the volume control. So let me take care of that, and then we'll come back and finally get on the road to getting the controls clean and getting this finished. Stand by. All right, coming back in now with one half of the garage lights turned off and all of our dial lamps replaced. Everything's looking very good, consistent across the front of the receiver. The meter light, stereo pilot light, and all the panel lamps look very, very close in luminance. Not one is brighter than the others. If anything, maybe the dial lamps are just a tad brighter, but not very much, not distracting. And to be honest with you, I'm glad this part is over with. Getting these lamps out was not easy. Trying to find the lamps wasn't that easy either. It was kind of a challenge because of the simple fact that you always want to put in it what came out of it, and of course, it's not possible. They don't make those lamps, or at least I couldn't find them anyway. So you have to find the best possible substitute you can get, and then as we've seen, when you get the lamps out, you may run into another problem. And so kind of glad this part of it's over. So what we're going to do from this point is I'm not going to film me cleaning 20 controls on this receiver, but I am going to kind of show you my method for doing a couple of them. And everybody has their own methods for doing this. Mine is always kind of centered around that cleanliness thing. I don't want a bunch of chemical pooling on the circuitry, and so I do everything I can to prevent that. So let's take a minute here to pause, and then we'll come back and we'll start working on the controls.
Yes, we all are partners in this cosmic dance. Nice, nice, very nice, 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 very nice. So many people in the same
All right, coming back in, and before we start messing around with the controls of this, probably not a bad idea just to touch on contact cleaners. Lots of different companies make contact cleaner. Keg Laboratories probably being the most popular one. They're the ones that make Fader Lube and Deoxit and quite a few others. But they're not the only company that makes quality contact cleaner. This is made by MG Chemicals. This is called Super Contact Cleaner. And I've used this for a long time, and it does an excellent job. Now I'll add this. In a bind, yes, you can use WD-40. In a bind, once I used rubbing alcohol in an infant's medicine dropper syringe to clean a control. So yes, there are some substitutes you can use, but your best practice is to find yourself a good contact cleaner and use that to avoid any type of issues that might arise from using something, you know, that's not specifically made for an old potentiometer. Now, we have a roll of toilet paper here. As I've said before, everything for me is kind of centered around making sure things are clean, not trying to alter anything or change it. And for me, what I prefer to do is this volume control right here is a 3-stage control. It's going to be the biggest one in the unit you're going to clean. And so what I will do is I will pack toilet paper around this, because I'm going to spray it from the top, because I have openings at the top and openings at the bottom. But the ones at the top I can get to really easily. And so what I'll do is I'll spray it from the top, and then any excessive spray will fall right out onto the toilet paper. On the top of the can, there's an L, M, and an H, low, medium, and high. This is the strength or force of how fast the cleaner comes out of the can. So here you can see each chamber of it. I don't have the camera zoom, so you can't. So you just put yourself a little dab in each one. And let that sit and exercise it back and forth a little bit. Turn the unit back on. And then that balance control is perfectly silent. And what I will do is I will go down the line, I'll let that sit there for a few minutes, and then that way any excessive spray, and no matter how little you use, some will drip out the bottom. There's no question. And so I'll let that sit there for a minute till I know that it's purged itself out onto the toilet paper, then take the paper out. And so that's kind of my method for doing it. You can find other techs that'll tell you, it doesn't matter, you can spray as much of that stuff in there as you want, it won't hurt anything. Maybe that's true. I've never flooded one of these with contact cleaner, but I would think you would want to use as little as you can because one, it's expensive, and two, once you start getting that contact cleaner on the circuit boards themselves have a little bit of surface dust that you can't get off by just blowing it out with a compressor, and so you see little dots, little drips of where the spray has been, and so it doesn't look very nice. So it's just my method of doing it. You can do it 5 other ways probably, but it's just, to me, it's just cleaner, makes everything look nice if you don't overspray the control. So I'll go down the line and do all of those and get those taken care of, not forgetting there's a switch in the back that couples and separates the preamp from the main amp. If you have that type of receiver, don't forget that switch. Because if you forget that switch, the chances are pretty good one day there'll be a connection problem there. So make sure you take care of that. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up the controls. Once I get the controls finished, we're going to get it back together. We're going to do a final play test on it. Stand by. All right, I'm going to bring you back in just to kind of show you how to do it for these inline switches. And these are the ones that have a rotary knob connecting it from the front, but the switch is actually kind of an inline switch. And if you look up here at the top, when you move that switch all the way to one side, it gives you an opportunity to be able to see inside, and you can see the contacts. But if it's rotated all this way, all you see is the plastic bar that the contacts sit in. So if you start spraying control cleaner in there, all you're going to be doing is getting it all over the top of that plastic piece and not actually in the contacts itself. So rotate it out of the way, and then you'll be able to see the actual contacts in there. And then from that point, what you would do is you bring your control or contact cleaner up, spray some down inside there, and then of course it'll drip all the way down through the entire length of the switch, running out the bottom and hitting the toilet paper. And that one, depending on how dirty it is, you may have to do that one a couple of times. And this one, it works fine, but I'm going to clean it anyway. But that's how you would do that. Now further down, we don't quite get that lucky because this one, if you turn the receiver up on the other side, no matter where you move this switch, that hole right there that you can see is covered by that plastic slider for the contacts. So you can't, if you spray contact cleaner in there, you're only going to be, again, flooding it on top of that plastic bar. You're not going to get any on the actual contacts itself. So what I did here, and this is something that is a little tricky to do, but what I did was I opened up this little piece of metal. I just pried underneath with a dental pick because it's not real tough, and pried it up a little bit. And that way, what I can do is I can get the very tip of the straw of the contact cleaner in that little access where I pried up, and then again just spraying the contact cleaner in there, and it will run down the length of the switch, and then of course you'll pack your toilet paper underneath there so it doesn't run all over the place. So again, just, you know, tips and tricks for some of these odd switches that are not rotary that you don't have good access to get those cleaned up. Well, since we looked at the inline controls on the main on the board there, it's probably not a bad idea to kind of give you my method for doing the rotary controls through the front of the faceplate for the bass and the treble. I basically just hook up an extension hose to the can, and what I'll do is, and let's see if we can get you zoomed in here. You know, that first chamber right there is not really too difficult to get to, the first one. It's the one that's in front of it that's kind of a pain to get to. So the last thing you want to try to do is navigate a whole can of control cleaner while messing with that. So bring this in, avoiding your dial string, and keep in mind I'm not doing it while I'm holding a camera at the time. But what you'll do, I have an angled cut at the end of that tube, and I'll just rest it up against there, and then just with my free hand I'll press the button, and it slows the flow just a little bit more than it is on the low setting, and so it'll kind of drizzle into the hole. And of course, in this particular case, there's not really any way you can avoid getting control cleaner on the board. I'll pack, what I did was pack some toilet paper around the sides, and once you see the toilet paper absorbing some of it, you know that it's coming out the bottom through the opening in the bottom. So that's the way I would approach that and getting that clean. So, and then we have these guys, and there's a method there too. It's not a very good one, but there is one. Let me go over here and you can see these a little bit better. Yeah, where are we? There we go. So if you look at this, you can see that there's another plastic slider in there, but that hole right there will give you just enough access. Keeping in mind, I've got this guy's receiver tilted. It's sitting up on my flashlight, and so it's tilted towards the front. So obviously, it's going to flow, that cleaner is going to flow straight down towards the front of the contacts if you can get a little bit in there. And again, this isn't anything that you'll need to flood, just a little bit. Packing a little toilet paper around it just so you can absorb whatever you can get off of it. And that would be my method for taking care of these. But you'll want to make sure that that switch is in a position to where that plastic piece right there is not visible, because if it is, you're just going to be shooting control cleaner right into that plastic piece. So just another little tip. All right, I hope you guys have enjoyed hanging out with me while we repair the very nice old Sony STR-7055. This was made in 1973, and I can think of no other album that holds more significance to me than The Dark Side of the Moon, which was also released in that year. So on the way out, let's listen to a little bit of this.